Coaches Timeout with Nigel and Christoph, the podcast.
All right, hi, welcome to the fifth episode of Coaches Timeout, the podcast, and we are taping on a Monday. Actually,
Yep.
my name is Coach Nigel Tolentino from Black Frog Sheeran, and with me is Coach Christoph Nye from Arancia La Rochelle. Christoph, how are you today?
Today I'm better.
Are you able to sleep now?
Yeah,
Able to
yeah, yeah.
sleep
No,
properly last night?
I had normal sleep. I was quickly over it.
All right, well, we'll talk about that later on. But, we have a special guest tonight. And, you know, he actually doesn't need any introduction at all. He is one of the more well-known names when it comes to Luxembourg basketball in terms of coaching, Coach Brian Carroll, here with us today. And I would just also like to say that Coach Brian is going to be a semi-regular analyst for game weekends here with us on the podcast. So, hey, Coach Brian, I know it was short notice, but thank you very much for joining us this evening.
I appreciate
How are
you
you?
guys for having me. I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
Doing well.
It's good to be able to get a little La Rochelle love in the building. I met Nigel in La Rochelle, and I met Christoph over at Contran, and now we're all connected by La Rochelle. So,
Yeah,
I know, right? Okay. Well, finally we have basketball back, right? And I read your article on the FLBB website, and it ties in with what we're trying to do here about talking basketball and sharing what we know to those who might not be very familiar with Luxembourgish basketball. Okay, so let's start off with some topics. Which game should we discuss first? Which team should we discuss first?
I mean, for me personally, I would talk about the national team first because that was probably the best basketball I've seen in Luxembourg in a long time. So I know I mentioned that a couple of times in my article, but I was watching that as a legitimate fan of what I was watching, even though basically all the guys that are there, and we all know Coach Ken Diederich, but that basketball to me was as team oriented, as together as I've ever seen from Luxembourg basketball. And I think that a lot of teams can look at what happened with that national team and kind of emulate that within their own club, because that team was fighting for each other 1 through 12 or 1 through 11 and really giving everything that they got. So that was kind of my real motivation for wanting to get back involved in writing for FOBB, is because that got me excited, knowing that those guys during that pause really did everything they can to stay in shape and continue to get better when really a lot of people didn't even have access to gyms.
True. And we talked about the Luxembourg national team players who are also abroad, like Oliver Vujakovic and Ben Kovac. And we have Alex Laurent, Thomas Grun as well. He was not available for this bubble, but they were all really head and shoulders of, they improved by leaps and bounds from how we saw them play here in Luxembourg when they were still here domestically in the league. Right. How about you, Christoph? Any thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, I mean, I can only underline what Brian just said. I mean, it was probably one of the best basketball games we saw in a long time from a Luxembourgish team. The 2 games, Iceland and Kosovo. And what was particularly impressive was, as Coach Brian said, was that these guys, especially those guys who were not practicing with their team over a long period, were there on that level, and you didn't see a difference. And now with everybody back in their clubs, let's hope that on the Total League side, this will also have an impact on the teams, the guys coming back from the bubble with their new experiences, the improved level of playing, and this should have also impact on the games here domestically.
It looked that way actually, but Coach Brian, which player from the national team surprised you the most? Let's say surprised, but
I would say Ben Kovac was coming off the bench for Basketball, okay? And he had different moments during that tournament where he felt like he was the best player on the court. And he wanted the ball. He wanted the opportunity to close games. And, I mean, I've seen Oliver Vukovic dominate the Total League. I've seen Alex Laurent dominate the Total League. Ben Kovac was never a player who was dominating the Total League as a young player. but you knew that he had aspirations to be the best player that he could be, and he's certainly showing that in the Netherlands, and he showed it in the tournament.
Mhm. Yeah, to me, he showed no fear taking those threes. He had back-to-back threes when they were down 15 that helped spark the rally. Um, I also need to mention Bobby Melcher. He came back just for this bubble. Um, I don't know what was expected of him, but he delivered. He definitely delivered, and he was actually playing hurt, so to speak.
Yeah, I think they just made an announcement that he's done for the remainder of the year, and that's a big blow for racing because I think a lot of people looked at racing playing with one professional as really playing with two professionals. The type of, I guess, what they put into bringing in Bobby Melcher and making sure that he felt acclimated in that program, and they kind of treated him as if he was the second professional to start off with, and having him and two other professionals, I think that racing would have had a chance to make a deep run, but without Bobby, it's going to be a lot more difficult.
True. However, they did debut Thomas Rutherford as their second pro, and he came out with 15 points and 21 rebounds in their win against Contern, who that Contern basically won against Heffingen on Wednesday, and then they ran into this brick wall against Racing. What else can you say about this Racing team at the moment without Bobby?
I mean, when you're playing a racing team that they're going to be scrappy. They're going to give everything that they have every single game. They're going to be well coached. I don't know too much about the new coach that they have from Sweden, but they've changed coaches a whole lot, and the players have always responded well since Mike Oplin brought them into the Total League. And no matter who the coach has been, they've had players that were going to die for loose balls, scrap, give everything that they have, not care about their stats. And that's not going to change with Bobby Melcher being out, but losing him is still going to be a significant blow to anybody, no matter what team that he was playing for.
Christoph, Contern always had their old reliables, Roel Bierenbaum and Rene Walsfeld, and they, again, delivered us 12 points and 10 points each, respectively, for Contern. Were they really missing Mihailo Angelkovic in this game?
I mean, of course, he's probably their best Luxembourgish scorer. But what has to be mentioned here was that Racing was particularly good from behind the three-point line in this game, which was not one of their biggest strengths over the last years. You had Luis Sorania going 4 from 9, Jordan Giles going 4 from 8, and in total 13 out of 32 three-point shots, which at 40%, which is quite impressive shooting for what you're used to from Racing. And yeah, if Kontan is missing and probably for still a few more weeks, Mihailo Anđelković, they need to find additional scoring input from the Luxembourgish guys.
Coach Brian, any thoughts on the Contern team as presently constructed?
And Contern those guys have been together for a long time. The coach has been there for, I think this is his third consecutive year there, and he was there a year beforehand. So at this point in time, for me, it's kind of I hate to say this in a pandemic year, but it's kind of like a do or die to be able to figure out whether or not the guys like Bierbaum and Volsfeld are still going to be players that you can consistently rely on a day-to-day basis, or if they're going to, at some point in time, have to turn it over a new leaf and start looking at promoting some of their younger guys outside of Mihailo. We all know Mihailo is a star in the making in the Total League, but Bierbaum and Raul and Rene and Alan Gangler and all those other guys. Those guys have been featured guys for quite some time, and my hope is that they can continue to do what's necessary to keep getting better every single year.
Okay. They did add Nico Hitlet the year after they added Mihailo, and I really like Nico's, his length, his size, and his shooting ability. However, it seems that he's still trying to get his footing, so to speak, on this team. And like you said, hopefully they can turn that corner where they can get another scorer like Nico to be more consistent as he goes along with the season.
They can get talent. I mean, that's for sure. Carlton is a talented club, and if they can find the right mix, I mean, they can be in that discussion of making the playoffs and competing for a Final Four spot if they can find the right connection with the Americans. And they've had a lot of them. They have a lot of different Americans. So hopefully, this combination for them is one that they can get them moving in the right direction.
Christoph, you're playing at Cella. Ettelbruck next weekend. And okay, I'm not going to ask you what your game plan is or what the scouting report is, but how do you see that team at the moment?
Well, if you just look at the results, they are currently the best team in the league. They're particularly impressive offensively, having a lot of guys able to score in double digits, and they seem to be pretty in shape from what I've seen from the Amical game, and they're currently the team to beat in the total league, and they really want to go deep. They have Sticky coming back from the national team, Ivan Delgado, so two really good players that have gained a lot of experience on the international level, and for us that will be a really difficult game. Especially after how and what we showed this Saturday.
Okay. Coach Brian, Christoph mentioned Ivan Delgado and Sticky, Philip Gutenkopf. And Philip Gutenkopf actually really showed out in this game. He had 22 points and 8 assists. He's been playing in the total league for quite a span of time. How have you seen his consistent improvement? Or what can you say about his consistent improvement?
I mean, his love for the game is genuine. So he's always going to be in the gym. He's working to improve. He's obviously he's always been able to shoot pull-up jump shots as well as anybody since he's been in the youth leagues. But his ability to be able to make other players better now and extending his range well past the three-point line, getting in the paint, getting in the free throw, wanting to take big shots. He's essentially, I think people realize at a young age that he was going to be the next great player in Excel, and he certainly hasn't disappointed.
How about Ivan? Were you surprised at how Ivan played for the bubble team, for the national team? Or was it something that was bubbling into the surface, so to speak?
That question for me?
Yeah, well, either of you.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, that for you, Brian, because Christoph already mentioned Ivan. So yeah, don't worry.
Ivan is another one of these competitive kids. I mean, he wants the best assignment from a defensive perspective. He wants to prove that he can be a consistent offensive player. You saw him in the total league that Coach Ken Diederich, he trusted him in big moments and he delivered. He's an unselfish guy. As I look at him, I'm just hoping that he can continue to want to develop himself into a primary scorer that's capable of scoring in the high teens because he has the ability to do it. But on a team with a lot of veteran players and two Americans, it's sometimes tough for him to develop into a top option, but he certainly has the talent to do it.
He looks like he can be a really, really good player with a specific role. Like he doesn't need the ball in his hands all the time. I like how he ran the pick and roll a few times with Oliver Vujakovic, and he also gave that alley dunk to Alex Laurent off of a sideline inbound play. Okay, Christoph, let's go to Arantxa and Walfer. That game, we were kidding earlier. I actually were able to sleep properly now last night. But when you and Coach Alex were both here, the last episode, you guys were talking about wanting to or hoping that there was no rust, or you guys shook off the rust, and that being physically prepared to play a game after a long layoff. I know you guys had game plans for each other, but it looked like from the onset, Walfer was shooting 25% from three prior to this game. And then they came out with 15 threes. So, like, that kind of won them the game, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, when we talk with Coach Krebs, his game plan, at least the one he shared, was to score more points than us. Well, they did it. And no, to be serious, I mean, I think they had a really good shooting night. but we gave them also a lot of open opportunities by having miscommunication in defensive rotations or being late in closeouts. So I won't go into all the details of what went wrong in what we did, but we had some things that we discussed for that game and that we wanted to do. Some of them worked. Some of them worked pretty well, but others we were not there where we should be. Um, from a physical standpoint, I think we were there. I mean, we were physically there in the game the whole 40 minutes. So I don't see a major problem on that side. But we need to get back into our team communication on defense and team play on offense, like we were before the break. And having not been able to play a preseason game was not an advantage. But I mean, that's how it is, and we know what we have to work on, and we're gonna do that this week, and then hopefully show a better game on Saturday.
Okay. Coach Brian, any thoughts on that Lorset Walford game? I mean, yeah.
I think that your start to the season was excellent. I mean, guys were contributing across the board. You were getting contributions from a variety of different Luxembourg players, and both Dwayne and Terrell really have fit in well and integrated themselves on the team. I was really happy for Terrell that he was able to sign an extension, because I've gotten to know both those guys working with them at the International School of Luxembourg. And I mean, they're top-notch people. And when you have those type of people in your locker room, I mean, you know that you can count on them whenever you're up by 20 or if you're down by 20, that they're going to still be out there competing and giving a good effort. And I think for all these teams that are coming back from this layoff, I mean, without having any preseason games, some of these first games are going to feel almost like tune-ups in preseason, and try to figure out what's working, because, I mean, literally when you got 3 months off, okay, it's almost like it's a new season.
Mm-hmm. Dean Gint, we all know Dean Gint, right? He suffered an ACL. He had an ACL surgery, came back from it, and he's a scorer. He hit 5 of 8 threes in that game, Walford versus Arancia. And we also had Malcolm Krebs, 3 of 4 from 3. But these two guys, local guys for Walford, do you see them sustaining this this scoring pace now that there's the restart, or is it gonna taper out at some point? Coach Brian.
I mean, I think that with everybody, it goes in ebbs and flows. I think that Dean Ginn is probably as healthy as he's been in quite some time. I mean, he's in Sparta. Everybody knows whenever he was at his best, he was one of the best in his position. He was a national team player. Malcolm Krebs is as good as anybody in his age group in Luxembourg, and I know he has aspirations to be the best player that he can be. And Coach Krebs does a great job with that group. So when you look across the board, if they have those type of JICL players, not even to mention on the inside with Xavier. Yeah, I mean, and then you add 2 professionals to that, and a deep bench with guys that can come off. I think they had
Tom Koenig.
Yeah, they had, I think maybe 8 guys that scored 8 points or more in their last game. This team on paper is as good as any team in the league, but it's just about getting the experience and them continuing to trust in the process of going through the growing pains of not always being as consistent as they probably would want to be.
But Coach Brian, you mentioned something that I really latched onto here, was that in your article you wrote about how some pros stayed on. They could have gone home, but they decided to sacrifice and stay on and see the season through. And like you said, most of like Tyrell, for example, and Dwayne worked with you at the international school. Like, how important is it? Because when we talk about pros, we're not just talking about National 1 pros. We also have we also have pros in National 2, and right now they're just sitting there waiting to see what happens. And their league, National 2, National 3, still no word whatsoever what's going to happen to it. But I mean, kind of sounds unfair at some point.
I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, these folks, if we want to be completely honest, a lot of these people are getting paid less than minimum wage in Luxembourg, even during the season. Okay, so I don't know how many places in the world where somebody who's working at McDonald's is making more than a professional basketball player. So for these people to come in here and give everything that they have for their clubs and stick around the clubs, at the very least, they should have some clarity as to whether or not they're going to be playing games. And I mentioned it in the article that at the moment, National 2 and National 3 haven't made a decision in terms of who's playing. I've been working with a lot of players that are on loan on T71 that have been practicing and trying to do some skill development work, and they don't even have the opportunity to be able to play 5-on-5 with their teams in practice, okay, because they are under different COVID restraints than the rest of the country. So when you think about what it means for a young player who's looking for an opportunity to continue to improve, and you're taking away the opportunity for them to compete in games and practice 5-on-5, you're hopeful that those National 2 teams, whenever we come back in August, still have enough people to be able to consistently put out a product. And these players aren't getting to the point where they're so frustrated that they're not interested in playing basketball anymore.
Christoph, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, a point that you can mention here as well is if you're currently a National 2 player of a decent level, what are your options? I mean, will you consider moving to National 1 in order to be sure to play? Or will you stay with a National 2 team where you can compete maybe like 30 minutes, but maybe next season you don't know. There's still a cancellation or whatever. So this is an important point because these guys that are on teams like, I don't know, BC Mass or Grangerveld that have not finished their last season. This season was shortened out, cancelled after a few games only. So I mean, it's a lot of like lifetime of your basketball career that is off. And what do you think? What do you consider now as options? Because nobody knows how the season will look like next season. So if there will be an option where National 2 teams will somehow be integrated into National 1, if there will be teams that promote, nothing is decided yet on that end. So top level National 2 players, they probably have to think about certain decisions that they have to take in the future right now.
True, but that also contributes to the fear that is gripping National 2 teams, which is, their top players leaving to be bench players in National 1, and then that dilutes basically the talent level in National 2. So it's a tough call, right? Yeah. But I think one thing that we also have to keep in mind is that these young players, professional players, could travel to a foreign country, basically, all that the mental strength that they have to be away from home, compounded by all this COVID situation, and then having no clarity as to how their season's going to play out. I'm sure most of them are struggling, like Coach Brian mentioned.
I mean, I got a lot of them reaching out to me to try to get work at the school because I think even during the most active periods before COVID, there's a lot of free time for a lot of these Americans. Most of those folks aren't doing anything really with their coaches until in the evenings, okay, depending upon whether or not they have a professional coach or if they have somebody who's only coming in the evening. So with all this free time that they had normally, and then you take away the basketball from them, I mean, there's it takes a true commitment for these players to continue to do what's necessary to stay in shape, stay professional, and stay ready, not even knowing whether or not they're going to have a season or not.
Yeah, that's tough. All right, moving on to the T71 game of the week. And my wife and I were watching that game, and she was like, "This is the game of the week, but there's no commentary." That's for another day. But basically, okay, we have Frank Mueller playing out his last season. Is this confirmed? Is this his last season?
They made the announcement. They made the announcement for Nelson Delgado a couple of times too, though.
Hey, that can always change. I mean, Frank is basically pacing local guys with 12 points and 15 rebounds. It's like that's been his average for like the past 4 or 5 years he's been playing. It doesn't taper off at some point. But you work with at T71 at the moment, Coach Brian. And do you have chances of like watching Frank in practice and in game, of course in
I,
games as
I,
well.
I get a chance. I get a chance to be around the little guys on Monday. I just came back from practices now, and I'm involved with the youth over at T71, so I'm not necessarily working with the men's team, but I see how they are consistently competing every single day in practice to get better. And when you got guys like Tom Schumacher and Frank that are leading by example for everybody. I mean, the pros that come in there, they watch and they say, hey, these guys are committed. They're doing all the little things. They don't care about their stats. Okay, and all of it trickles down. I mean, those guys are genuine leaders, and those players, the young players and all the other stuff, those guys are rooting for those young players too for their success. So all across the board, it's truly a team atmosphere over in T71, and I think that they have a really good group of Americans this year too, that as first-year pros is integrated in that team as well as anybody. So I think that even though that they're not in the top spot at the moment, I think that you can see them getting back to the days where they're competing for titles every year.
Christoph, you watched that game as well, right? T71 on live stream. What are your thoughts on Jumon Ray Ivy and Stephen Harris?
Well, they both had really a good game against Ash. You had the Jamont Ivy scoring 6 out of 8 3-point shots, which is of course then really tough to guard. And Steve Harris on the inside, he was really a beast. So he was clearly unstoppable there with 29 points. And playing against the national team center Clancy Rock, he dominated him during the whole game. But what I want to mention here was that Ash really struggled against the T71 defense. That was some quite switching defenses, and going only for 4 from 21 from behind the line for Ash. That was of course a really tough shooting night, and which explains also in parts why in the end there was a 15-point difference in this game. That De Blanche right from the start took it in their hands and never let them get back into the game.
Well, Miles Jackson, Cartwright, and Clancy Rock finished with 21 each, and Clancy also finished with 18 rebounds, par for the course. But Coach Brian, when you look at that matchup, has there ever been a matchup like Clancy and Stephen Harris in recent Luxembourg basketball in terms of pros?
I mean, there's Ryan Sherry was a guy who, and now the game's kind of changed a little bit, because I remember when we first came into 2 pros, the majority of the people were picking 2 inside guys. I know myself, whenever I was in concert, my first year, I had 2 inside guys, and I know that with Nelly and Ryan Sherry, I mean, those teams were just beating people up on the boards on a consistent basis, and I don't think there's any team at the moment in National One that has 2 front court Americans, but Clancy is obviously as good as anybody that you're going to find here, playing in the 4 spot, and Steve is proven himself in a short amount of time that he can play at a much higher level as well. So I think that's probably the premier matchup at the moment when it comes to front court players that are competing against each other here in Luxembourg.
Now we go to 2 teams that have chosen not to play with non-JICL players. We're talking about Telstar Hesperange and Sparta. Sparta played against the Pikes, and Telstar lost 82-93 to Heffingen. Let's start with the Telstar Heffingen game. What are your thoughts on that, Coach Brian?
I mean, I think that within the 4th quarter they had it down to 6 points. So it's a testament to Gabor Boris. I mean, he's been doing it. I mean, he's been doing it for a long time. I think he's probably the longest tenured coach in Luxembourg. He's been there, I think, since 2013 as a player coach, and then he took over the following year as a coach. And those guys have always bought in consistently to his approach whenever they were fighting to be able to make the playoffs in National 2, whenever they were in the playoffs, and they were looking to try to move up to National 1 and were very close. And then this past year when they finished in 1st place. So those guys got a tremendous amount of pride to them. This is going to give them an opportunity to really showcase their skill set. And whether or not they win any games or not doesn't mean that people aren't getting better. And I think for all these teams, There's no better time to showcase the talent of local JICL players if your team isn't in a position to compete for a championship than right now.
Mhm. I really like Coach Gabor Boris's guys, and Christoph. We know them well. Basically, we played against them a few times, and they play hard. And one guy that we mentioned was Jill Kirshen. What are your thoughts on Jill Kirshen?
Jill Kirshen, if he can play a lot of minutes, he's going for double most of the time. I mean, he's a very active player and a great rebounder for his size, and yeah, he can now show during the rest of the season what he's capable of doing if he gets a lot of minutes. And yeah, so interesting player to follow up. Also, if you check the MVP race, I don't say he's a potential MVP candidate, but if you
Stats wise,
yeah, stats wise, and MVP in some leagues are designated through stats, and he will probably end up with one of the best stats lines of Luxembourgish players in this year if he continues like this. Another player to mention, of course, is Zach Traer, the Canadian guy who's on the Telstar team, who had quite slow start, let's say, into total league, but against Heffingen, he went crazy from behind the arc and shooting 8 threes, which was, I guess, I didn't check it, the record of the season so far of individual threes made by a player. So that helped them to stay in the game, and it somehow underlined a little bit the slow start of Heffingen after the break. They struggled in Compton. Now they won the game against Telstar, but they definitely have some work to do to get back into the race for the playoffs.
and Coach Brian, you mentioned that when we're talking about the national team at the top of the podcast, you said that you want to be able to see these guys come back into the domestic league and show show what they're capable of after a long layoff. And Max Schmidt did just that with 20 points on 7 of 11 shooting. At the same time, we also had Nelly coming back or bouncing back with a 23-point, 13 rebound effort compared to the first game. Max has always been a staple in the total league or in National One. What can you tell me about Max Schmidt?
I think there's not a player who, of all the Luxembourg players that I've competed against, he's probably had his, that's the guy who has hurt my teams the most that I've coached. So in the past, whenever I was in La Rochette and different times whenever he was playing the Volfenons and T71, it always seems that he gets up for the big games. He's a guy who's really able to get his whole team involved if needed. He can score. He's had games of 30 points against me at different points in time. So I've always had a tremendous amount of respect for him as a player. I think that he's a great leader for that group, and I think that when he's motivated, he's in the discussion as one of the top playmakers in Luxembourg.
Christoph, you know this Heffingen team well as well. They're all basically vets. What are your thoughts on them? And I know you guys played the derby already, and you're gonna meet them again for the second time.
Congratulations on that win too, by the way, because I know that they've been waiting for that win for a long time.
What are your thoughts on Coach Daniel Brandau's team?
Well, it's difficult for me to say because the rivalry between the two teams. So I can't share everything here publicly what I would share privately. No, but I mean they have added Christopher Jones during the off season, which is of course a tremendous individual player, and they clearly have ambitions to play for the top of the league, which is also what their coach announced here when he was our guest. And yeah, so far they have not reached the level that they want to play at, and they definitely put the work into to get to the level. On the other hand, they need to find the right combo of professionals. I mean, they changed one of their players during the break. Now we have to see if the player who has arrived now, Terrell Winston, is the right one. Maybe a little bit early to say, but we're gonna see.
All right. Okay, so now we talk about the Sparta Pikes game, and I had the chance to asked Philip Aaron how he felt about the game, and this is what he had to say.
Salut and good evening. I think first we should be very thankful that we can play the game and that we can do sport in general, because around the world, a lot of people they need to stay at home. They can't play, they can't practice, they can't do sports in general. Also in Luxembourg, I think second league, third league, and also the younger kids, they can practice, but they can't play games. So I think we should be very thankful that we have that big possibility to play games and also to do sports in general. About the game, I think we had a very difficult first quarter. We trade already early by 16 points. We never managed to increase that lead during the game. So I think that was also a main reason that we lost the game. But we also faced, for the first game, we faced a really good Muzo Parks team. They have good Americans, they have good guys, they have good inside players. And in my opinion, they will play for a top 4 spot. So in general, I think we never gave up. We had a good team spirit. We shared the ball well. We played good defense for one half. But I think to beat that Muzo Parks team, you should play good defense the entire game.
All right. So that was Philip Aaron from Sparta. Any thoughts on what he mentioned, both about the Pikes team and everything else?
Well, I know that I was working at a overseas basketball elite camp in Las Vegas, and I was doing I had an opportunity to be able to speak in front of the group, and I'm looking at the crowd, and I'm like, hold on, like this kid looks familiar. Like where do I know this kid from? And I look, I'm like, oh my goodness, they got Philip Aaron, like traveling to Las Vegas at that moment to be able to compete against pros, okay, to strengthen his game, knowing that he was returning to go to Sparta, but he wanted to play against the best. And he was out there in that whole camp doing a lot of the different things that you see in the Total League, competing, wanting the ball down the stretch, making big plays. And when you got players on your team that believe that they compete with anybody, then that means that you have the opportunity to grow your organization from within to compete for championships in the near future. Now, I'm not sure whether or not Sparta is going to be competing for championships in the near future, but I do believe that their decision to play without pros when everybody else is playing with pros is going to further help players like Mike Feipel, players like, I believe his name is Yannick. I don't know how to pronounce the last name.
Verbielen.
Yeah, I mean, those guys are guys that when you see them play on the court, you know that they have the potential to be high-level Luxembourgish players, okay? And this gives them the opportunity to really showcase that talent. And Coach Pascal Meurs is really big on player development, and there's not a better way for those players to showcase their talent playing against teams that are featuring 2 professional players.
Well, I can agree with what Coach Ryan is saying. I mean, when I was back with Pirates, we also took the decision back then to only play with 1 pro in National 2, and it certainly helped the Luxembourgish players to grow and to reach a different level. At the end of the day, though, you need also to have the results, and you know which results we had back there. I don't want to say that it will be the same for Sparta, not at all. That's not what I want to say, but they will have to really fight very hard to for each game to have a chance to win it. And if you win a game like this, that's extremely, you can be extremely proud, and it's a really great feeling to win a game if you play only with 1 or with 0 professional players against other teams that are lying to pros. So about the players here, you mentioned Yannick Verbeel, and he's really having a breakout season this year. And this game underlined the potential that he has as
23
a player.
points,
Yeah,
8 of 11 shooting.
Yeah, I checked his stats, and he's right now turning at 53% from behind the arc, which is an amazingly good number. And we know most of these players have a very good potential. You have Mike Feipel, who was with the national team bubble last time. You have Mattis Wolf, who is also a very interesting player on the long term. And then you have also some very, very young guys that are coming in, like Max Logelin.
Victor Stein.
Yeah, exactly. So there's really great potential with with the season how it has been decided that there is no relegation. What's the better time than doing something like this? And then you stay in the league, you can develop all your young guys. You just have then to find the right mix once the season is over, and add the pros that will compete with these guys, and then next year they will be on a totally different level.
I agree with the both of you. Like, I've been able to watch up close and personal Mike Feipel and Mattis Wolf and Philip Arendt and the under 20 teams that we played in Bulgaria and Portugal. But I'm big on Mattis Wolf. I mean, I told you this a million times. Christoph, go get Mattis Wolf out of Etzella. When he transferred out of Etzella and he told me about it, I was like, yeah, okay, here you go. Now you're going to play on a team that is young and that can give you a shot. Score, of course, like Coach Brian mentioned, Coach Pascal Muros is big and huge on player development. And instead of playing 2 minutes a game in Etzella, Mattis is now playing Mattis can now play like 20, 25, 28 minutes for a Sparta team that has no pros. So, and he's looking like he can really play. He can really develop. He can really show out. But not to take anything away from the veteran Muscle Pikes team. Keith Stone with 27 points, Mark Zoddy with 19, Gene Cox with 11, and Tom Welter and Luka Buntic with 10 points each. Buntic. Luka Buntic, he is a huge difference maker for this Pikes team. What are your thoughts on him?
I know last year there was a sense that they were basically playing with 3 non-JICL players, even though Luka Buntic is considered to be JICL because he played in the youth teams here. But he gives a dimension. There's not too many Luxembourg players that are as tall as him that can stretch the floor, rebound, block shots the way that he can, and it gives them the opportunity to bring in a different style of player for the Americans, knowing that you have Kalmas on the inside with Buntic, and obviously you still have players like Cox and Velter, who have been excellent players in the Total League for quite some time. I thought last year they had played as well as any team in the Total League, and they had a legitimate chance to compete for a championship. And we make changes across the board, and now this team is looking to try to get back to the level that they were at last season. Now, Chris Wolf, he had left on his own, but it's I don't ever think, in the case for La Rochette, it's a little bit different because guys like Dwayne Johnson and Terrell have been in Luxembourg before. But whenever you bring 3 people from the outside that don't know too much about Luxembourg, there's going to be a kind of a long integration process to get the team, everybody on the same page. And yourself being in Luxembourg, Christoph and Terrell and Dwayne being in Luxembourg, that makes that transition a lot easy. But on a club that's competing for championships, they need to make sure that everybody's on the same page as soon as possible. And I'm not sure if Muser Pikes at this moment is playing at a level where you can say that they're a championship contender.
Yeah, I mean, what is important to mention here, in my eyes, is on the Muselpike side, with the addition of Marcus Otti. Finally, they have their 2 pros that they want to compete with, and it's a different team than the one we faced, for example, in the beginning of the season, where there was only Keystone at that moment. And now I think they're probably not yet on the level where they were last season, but as you know, now it will be a very long season until the end of May for the regular season. And if they keep their core together, don't have major injury problems, well, they can go very deep, I think.
I mean, they certainly have the talent to do so. Losing Lawrence Schwartz was a big blow because he was a big-time contributor to them too.
Yeah.
But the rest of those guys, Raphael Martin, I mean, these guys have been battle tested. They've been in the finals. They know how to win. So at this point in time, if you're going to see them start to make that push, you're hopeful that all the JICL players that they've been counting on for years continue to trend upward.
Coach Brian, you mentioned in your article the new normal of how we're playing games, and part of the allure of playing in the total league, in Luxembourg, basically, is like having the fans and getting to interact with them in the buvette, in and out of the floor. Everyone, you both, we've all experienced that La Rochette experience with the fans, right? They can say for pound for pound, best fans in Luxembourg, but how
Shout
different
out
it
to
is
Kevin
now.
Harpers, by the way, too.
Exactly. He's the person I had in mind right away. Kevin Harpers, all the time. And so, like, how different it is it in this environment to play without fans? And does that affect the players, like, mentally?
Well, I mean, I I was coaching in National 3, so I'm used to playing in front of very empty gyms. So for me, it was not a big difference as a coach. I mean, for me, it felt like any other game because I don't pay that much attention of what's happening in the stands. For the players, though, I had the feeling that it was a difference, and I mean, if you used to have noise around you and you get this push or this opposition from the stands, and now when we played in Valfredange, which is a pretty large gym, it felt a little bit empty, and I don't know. I haven't spoken in detail with my players after the game about how they felt the atmosphere, but yeah, I mean, for me as a coach, it was not a big difference.
You can look and you can see, especially now because they've only played one game. You got to remind these folks like this is the total league and you're not playing in preseason games. So I mean, all these players have to really kind of to dig deep and realize like everything that they're doing at this moment is for the club and it's not really for their own. I guess notoriety, so to speak, because there's no parties after the game. There's nobody that's patting them on the back after the game and telling them how well they're playing. So literally everything that everybody should be doing at this moment is for team, and hopefully could be able to help some of the dissension that you may see on different teams about playing time and everything else. Hopefully that can calm some of those things down, knowing that literally like you're not playing to stay in the league, you're not going to go down, and there's no fans. Like we can really just focus on being the best team that we can be.
Okay. Coach Brian, is there anything else that you might have wanted to touch on that I didn't go through?
Just wishing Fels and Coach Christoph all the best. I mean, you guys have gotten off to a really good start, and I'm hoping that you guys continue to get the momentum necessary to compete for a playoff spot and ultimately be in the conversation for one of the top teams in Luxembourg, because a lot of those guys that you've been working with, they've been together for quite some time, and they deserve the opportunity to be able to be on a big stage. So continue success with what you're doing.
Thanks, Coach.
What are things that we can look forward to for the next game day?
I mean, for us, I can speak for us now. We are facing now two of the better teams in the league. So we play Saturday. We play against Etzala, and then we have to travel on Wednesday to Dudelange. So for us, this will be a real test. I mean, to see if we can improve how we play and if we are ready to compete for the top six now in order to reach the playoffs. But because afterwards we're gonna face immediately all like the direct opposition like Conton, Racing, Spada, Muzzle Pikes again. So for us, these two games, I mean, if we can win one of those two, that would be very good because those teams, I think, Etzala and T71 are above us at the moment. But I mean, we have to focus on our team and improve how we play together and our defense, get it back to the level where we want it to have, and then we're gonna see.
All right, I guess that's a wrap for this episode of the podcast. Hey, Coach Brian, appreciate your time. Thank you very much. I know it's very late at the moment. I can't wait to have you back next weekend, and so we could talk about what other observations you've had for those weekends, for that weekend's game.
I appreciate you having me. Looking forward to catching up with you guys as often as we can.
Yeah, hey, this was fun. And appreciate the time, and thank you for joining us, Coach. Have a good evening.
You too.
Thank you.
All right, that was a fun conversation we had with Coach Brian Carroll there, as we talked about the resumption or the restart of the men's league, men's total league. Um, I know we focus too much on the men's league, but we can say that we're gonna have some special guests for women's basketball as well as we move along, and we're also gonna have to mention a lot because there's a lot of them out there right now in the women's league that are competing at a very very good level, and a lot of youngsters also, and that also helps grow the sport. So any thoughts for any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, happy to be back on the court. Happy to have everyone with a negative test, at least in our team. I don't know the results, how it was for the other teams. And let's hope it continues like this and that we can compete as long as possible and bring this season to a successful ending and eventually have fans back in the gyms somewhere in the future.
All right, and like Coach Brian said, good luck to you, and of course, Arancia Laricet. All right, so this has been Coach Nigel Tolentino with, of course, Coach Christoph Nye from Arancia Laricet saying, have a good morning. We're going to post this on a Wednesday morning. Have a good day, everybody. Thank
Coaches
you for joining
Timeout
us.
with Nigel and Christoph, the podcast.